What was that like for you growing up, and how has that shaped you in terms of what you do now?
Yes, it is very rare. Obviously, at the time when I was growing up, that to me was normal. Both my parents were migrants, came over here. I would say my mum was more educated than my dad. They came from very poor families. She came to a new country, new hope, and what she did to be able to get a home, because she wasn't going to have kids out on the street, she had to manage her finances and did what she needed to do. She was sewing at home. We'd go to bed hearing the sound of the sewing machine, and she would be basically get paid next to nothing, but to keep everything afloat. And yes, we were taught budgeting. We had no choice.
So there's something about migrants and the work ethic and the supporting each other to get ahead that's really beautiful and really quite powerful.
That builds resilience. Interest rates do go up. People lose their jobs, redundancy. It is a part of life. Life doesn't go smooth sailing. So resilience is really, really important. And it needs to be taught with kids and passed down the generation. Life continues and we have to adjust. A lot of the times, women don't actually know the finances. They trust the male, the money is coming in, but they don't know it. One of the other key things is that women need to have a separate bank account. If you need to run away, you're talking about emotional abuse, domestic violence, survivors, you've got that. You don't want to ever be in a position where you are so vulnerable and you're an economic prisoner. And that's why the imbalance of power is how abuse is allowed to occur.
What does it take to be a financially empowered woman? And what can financially empowered women do together to change the world? A shocking statistic is that around 400,000 women in Australia are at risk of homelessness. And the cause of this is the lack of education about how to build a financial foundation, starting even before we first enter the workforce and well into our retirement years. My name's Dion Payne, and I'm the founder of the Financially Empowered Women podcast. I'm passionate about ending homelessness, and as part of that passion, I chose to look at the systemic barriers that are causing homelessness for women in the first place. The Financially Empowered Women podcast is designed to bring you the best experts from around the world to increase your financial know-how and give you practical and women-specific tips to overcome the challenges you might be facing, such as how to negotiate a better salary, demystifying super, or how to navigate a separation and ensure the assets are distributed fairly. My role is to provide you with the best information out there to change your trajectory and become a financially empowered woman, because you deserve it, and the world needs you more than ever to own your worth and help others to do the same.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest instalment of the Financially Empowered Women podcast. My name's Dion Payne. I'm your host for today, and I'm joined by Christina Jamieson. Let me tell you a little bit about Christina. Christina has a company called School of Home Ownership. Christina is a mortgage broker, a property strategist, and an educator with over 25 years of experience of helping women, especially after separation and divorce, take control of their financial future through home ownership. She has bought and sold over 45 properties, created solutions like rent to own, and advocates for domestic violence survivors. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dion. Lovely to be here.
It's lovely to have you here. Now, I was reading a little bit about you, and you mentioned that one of the big influences on who you are today is your mum, and the fact that you were brought up in a migrant household and your mum had control of the finances. That's something that is really rare. That's really not a conversation that I've had with many people. So I'd love to hear from you. What was that like for you growing up, and how has that shaped you in terms of what you do now?
Yes, it is very rare. Obviously, at the time when I was growing up, that to me was normal. But both my parents were migrants, came over here. I would say my mum was more educated than my dad. And they came from very poor families. So I think a lot of women, and speaking to a lot of women who would have gone through divorce, They've had to really know how to control their finances. It becomes a need. And for migrants in those days, they came with nothing. They really had to control their finances. So my mother was one of them, and she came to a new country, new hope. And what she did to be able to get a home, because she wasn't going to have kids out on the street, they were going to get a house first, make sure the kids could stay in there. And so she had to manage her finances and did what she needed to do. And to keep the home, we did that as well. And unusually, like in those days, women didn't work too much. But my mother had to work, and lowly paid as well as a labourer, to be able to make sure that we could keep that home and have a home. So she did a lot of work, and I remember as a seamstress, she was sewing at home. We'd go to bed hearing the sound of the sewing machine, and she would be basically get paid next to nothing, but to keep everything afloat. And yes, we were taught budgeting. We had no choice. For example, having 3 girls and always wanting new clothes. The way that my mum coped with that is that here's the money for you. You choose. If you buy one shirt, then that's your thing. If you buy multiple clothes, then that's your choice. So we definitely learnt how we could stretch out our money. And I use the same principle as well for my boys as well growing up.
That's fantastic. And look, it reminds me, it's kind of skipped a generation for me, but my grandparents migrated to the UK. And so what you're sharing there about your mum, I really saw that with my nan, retrospectively, because I wasn't there when she first arrived. But I really saw how she did lots of little things. She was a cake maker. She made these amazing cakes. She did some seamstress work as well. She had a job in a care home, and it was all about bringing in the money to make sure that her family could be looked after. And the other thing that really struck me, and you speaking about this reminded me of it, was because there was a lot of Jamaican migration. So this was back in the early 60s. There were a lot of Jamaicans that migrated to the UK, and they also, being part of a big church community as well, they really did help each other. So they had a system called the partner system, which is still running today in terms of it's a very Jamaican thing. But everybody puts money into the pool, and they do that on a week by week basis. So it's a regular saving scheme. And then one person in the group will get all the money for that week, and then the next person in the group will get all the money for that week. And so it goes round and round. And they did that, and they also used that to buy their homes, and just to be able to support the community around them to be able to buy homes as well. So there's something about migrants and the work ethic and the supporting each other to get ahead that's really beautiful and really quite powerful.
Yes, and what I find is that builds resilience. And one of my concerns that my mother has is that, oh no, I don't want your children to have to go through what we did. But I think it's actually very key that they do know about it. And it's an example for me. It's set financial resilience that is very critical in today's age, because interest rates do go up. People lose their jobs, redundancy. It is a part of life. Life doesn't go smooth sailing. So a lot of people who would have gone through divorce, you don't get to 50 without some sort of difficulties. Life doesn't turn out. It's not perfect. So resilience is really, really important, and it needs to be taught with kids and passed down the generation. I think when people came back from the war, they wanted everything to be perfect, but it just isn't. And life continues, and we have to adjust.
Yeah, 100%. And our young people are having new challenges as well. Now, I loved what you had to say about how you're teaching your boys about financial resilience. And it's good to... My perspective is that I certainly talk a lot about the challenges for women, and of course you do as well, the challenges for women if they don't have that financial resilience later in life. But then just remembering that we need to teach our kids, both genders, we need to teach them from an early age about that financial resilience piece as well, so that everybody can be empowered, and so there is an equal playing field. I'd love to hear what you're teaching your boys about financial resilience.
I hear a lot of complaints. So my kids are now about 20. My eldest one's turning 20. So he's got a lot of friends, and the 19-year-old has lots of friends. So I've got 3 boys. And the older 2, housing's unaffordable, we're never going to be able to do that. And it's like, you can't say that. This is School of Home Ownership. What are you talking about? So one of the key things is like, you have to have a job, right? Like, you don't sit and I love my kids, but one of them didn't like working. There was issues. He's very engineering minded. So he's now got a job as an engineer. He was built for that. But I've got an engineering background, so I'll say it. Social skills isn't the best skills as an engineer. So when he was working at different jobs, he had to, he couldn't over communicate, like missing rosters and things like that. And he's actually good. They're all good workers. So he didn't want to work. He goes, no, I'm not going to do this. It's like, right, you're finishing your HSC. You'll be the only kid that doesn't have a computer or a phone because you don't work. So it's very clear that you had to work, because you're not going to get a home without a deposit, even if you've got parents' help. And I see lots of parents that will throw down everything for their kids to have a home. I would never do it. If you have not shown the passion on your side to save a bit, you're just going to throw away whatever your parents. And I've seen parents discuss, dipping into the superannuation. It's like, I wouldn't do that. And I've heard stories where a woman was willing to sacrifice her superannuation. Her son and her daughter-in-law were lawyers. I'm saying, oh, well, they'd have a bit of a deposit. Nothing. They go overseas, they live in the city, and they're living the high life. And I said, you might as well just burn your money, because if they don't want to, they have the means, they could. And it's sacrificing what you've done, what you've built up. It's just no point, because if they wanted to, the money that they're getting, they can. So it's really important that you do have to have that desire. Otherwise, you're just throwing, I think my husband uses the word pearl to swines. It's like not much point doing that unless they have that commitment. Because if you don't have that commitment, you will lose that home. Because when interest rates go up, and we've had that situation just recently up post-COVID from low interest rates to high interest rates, if you don't, then you will not be able to keep that home. So life throws curveballs, and being financially street smart is really important.
Thank you. So that's a really great example there, and quite surprising in a sense that 2 lawyers that are on good incomes still didn't have a deposit for a home. However, I can understand that lifestyle creep sets in, and as you earn more, then you just spend more without actually thinking, okay, well, how about the pay rise that we just had, how about we actually use that to save for our deposit? So what you're bringing up there is a lot around discipline, which I think is really important. I'd love to hear from you. How do you help people in terms of coaching them to get them ready for home ownership?
So there's a whole different raft, depending on the generation. So if we focus on the divorced women and empowering women, what I found is we still hold a bit of traditional values where the women would do a lot more sacrificing and raising the kids, and the husband would generally earn more and work full time. That is changing, and I've seen it. So a lot of the times, a lot of women would have had the luxury of being able to, really benefit from the husband's or ex's income. So that changes when you get divorced, and that's a really big jump. And statistically, in 70% of households, the man makes the financial decision. So when they split up, you're talking about 70% of people will not have that financial decision, those major financial decisions experience. So I usually start, and I think it's probably summarized in a masterclass. So we have different issues, but the first one and the biggest one is the mindset. it's so important to be able to move from, oh, I'll never be able to focus on what can I do? And that's a lot of the time because people don't know the strategies and the concepts and what they need to do it. Now, I could tell you what you need to do, and if you choose not to do it, that's fine, because some people are used to renting if they've had that history. But mindset, like, people don't know how. Once they see that there is a strategy and how to go about it, it just revives people. I've just seen it so many times. It's like, right, I know what I'm doing. This is what I need to do. So a lot of the times it's not like a 1 week thing. You're talking about 6 months, a year. Worst case is 2 years. And usually that's because you've got a financial settlement work that needs to be worked out, and it takes about 2 years. So that's probably the biggest change that people need to do. But financial street smarts includes even just budgeting. A lot of people hate numbers. Like, I actually like them. But to go through every detail in budgeting, for example, is quite overwhelming. So some of the things that we do is we just do a budget, but we just move it away, keep it in bank accounts. So you can see this bank account is for my property, and that's it. Now, you can put extra, but there must be a minimum compulsory, and to actually build your budget. And when people see how much is in their bank account and can't overspend, they can do one of two things: go into the housing one, which we recommend locking it away, or they actually start adjusting and saying, okay, what's something I can, what's something I can't. So it means readjusting as well as your concept of what a home is. So as I previously said, that when you have 2 incomes, you can buy a much better house. When you go down on one, you've got to adjust. So I keep hearing people say, yeah, I want a 3-bedroom house. I've got 2 children and all that. And I'm saying, well, that's fine if you've got the double income, but you're going to choose to rent. And the 3 bedrooms more important than the security of a home. And that's one of the harsh realities that I have early on, is like, you might as well just get on with it and just say the truth. It's like, that's fine, but you're not going to be able to get a home, and that type of home, with the income that you've got now. Some of them, it's actually going to more full-time employment. And it's hard choices because a lot of women still want to spend time with their young children at home. But these are the choices you have to work through. Life has changed. How are you going to do it? And what's important? And I think we've got rising homelessness for women over 55. That's the fastest one. Rising forms of homelessness, especially because so many women are getting divorced and not having any superannuation, haven't worked. It really puts them in a more compromising position. And I've had phone calls from women saying, I couldn't find a home. I'm feeling like I'm homeless. Like I was so close to being homeless. So that's one of the things that spurs them on into making a decision. So I guess that's the big chunk of it, is the mindset, the budgeting, the adjustment to what the new life is going to be. Then we've also got, navigating the property market. So yes, we've got finances, and we've got ways of working through finances to get a mortgage. But the other part is the negotiation and the way they play the market. And to be honest, there's nobody that can play the market that well at the moment, unless you've got a lot of experience. Because to get into the market now, if you look at something like Sydney market, it's full on. Sydney, Brisbane, the markets are exploding. So a lot of people come in and say, well, I want to get a bargain. It's just, this is not the time for a bargain. So you've got to know what you can and what you can't get. Even when you've got auctions, I know that a lot of people are talking about real estate agents doing the wrong thing. I've been on both sides, and I can tell you, I auctioned my parents' property. We didn't expect the results. So some of the stuff, you've just got to know what the market is and put expectations. And I help people navigate the market and understand and what's realistic. Because people were turning up auction to auction and not getting the property. So it's like, I show them how to navigate it, how to deal with real estate agents, and to actually purchase a property as well.
Yeah, fantastic. If you've been watching the news lately, it's easy to feel a sense of despair between power-hungry global leaders and absolute chaos and division. it can feel like things are spiraling out of control. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and just to have a sense of powerlessness. But there is a way to push back. We can stop looking at what they are doing and start looking at what we can do. At Women for Homes, we firmly believe that where we put our money is making a choice for the kind of world that we want to live in. Our mission is powerful: to mobilise 1 million women to invest $5,000 to end homelessness by 2030, whilst being financially empowered along the way. It's practical, it's tangible, it's something that we can do now, and it's something that we can do to take our power back. Join us at www.womenforhomes.com. That's women4homes.com. Now, I'd love to drill in a little deeper to the financial vulnerability that women experience after separation and divorce. I know that's something that you see a lot of. What are some of the factors that are causing that are leading up to that?
There's multiple reasons. A lot of the times, women don't actually know the finances. They trust the male, the money is coming in, but they don't know it. And in my situation, my husband doesn't know. So I've had to really push my husband to know. It's like, if something happens to me? Because my kids, what's going to happen to my kids? You need to be able to, step up if, something goes wrong with me, you need to go. And we had a situation where I was sick and my husband was doing it, and it was like total disaster. So we learned you've got to have that skill. So that's one of the key points. And we talk about, for example, men with businesses, women don't know. Money's been hidden. And we're talking about real, if I could use the word narcissistic men, that, yes, they're high income earners, but they've also got access to information, to tricks, to whatever. Like, for example, there's shares. They've got shares overseas that the women didn't even know how to get the information. She only found out about it after the settlement and opened an envelope because she was living in the house temporarily. So you've got to know the finances. Not that you need to go out and go get it, is you've got to know. You've got to know. One of the other key things is that women need to have, if the most vulnerable, need to have a separate bank account that may not go just $10,000. And that's, if you need to run away, we're talking about emotional abuse, domestic violence survivors, you've got that. So you need to have, your ID, your bank account, and you need to be able to support yourself for a short period of time. Because if you get into that position, it's actually really hard to get even a temporary property. The system is just not anywhere good enough, which is unfortunate. So you don't want to ever be in a position where you are so vulnerable and you're an economic prisoner. So, and that's why the imbalance of power is how abuse is allowed to occur. Because if everyone leaves as soon as there's the first sign of abuse, it would stop. You'd have to deal with it, but it takes years. And a lot of the time it's when you're in an economically vulnerable position. You've got children to feed. So that's one of the key issues. So know your finances. I actually recommend you always work. Now people say, oh, I'd love to, keep with the kids. Well, I always say first of all, for sanity's sake, to have a job. Like I had 3 kids when they were young. It was crazy, but it also keeps you out in the market and makes you less vulnerable. You've also got sounding boards and people that you can actually compare to. So it's really important. I think that those are ways that you keep yourself in a less vulnerable position.
Yeah, look, that's really sage advice, and it reminds me of a couple of conversations that I've had recently. One was a little while ago with a lady who was experiencing domestic violence. She put up with it for a long time because she knew that once she left, she would be homeless. But the crux of it that she had to leave was that she knew that if she didn't leave, there was going to be a fatality, and it was probably going to be her or her kids. So she did. She left, and she ended up sleeping in her car for a period of time with her son, who was in year 12, and he was finishing his HSC, sleeping out of their car. Thankfully, they got back on their feet. They're now in accommodation, but that was a real example of what can happen. Sort of that's the sort of extreme of what can happen, and it was really, really unfortunate for her and for her family. And then the other conversation I had was with a girlfriend yesterday who is thinking about leaving her partner, but wants to get herself ready before she actually makes that move. So I loved what you had to say about having the separate bank account, having some money so that if you do have to leave, you've got some, you're prepared, and it doesn't have to be the extreme case that I referred to before.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, it's quite interesting because a lot of women saying, oh, he's quite amicable, and she's got the kids and they're mediating and it's 50-50 with the property. I go, well, I don't think it's 50-50 given that your income and your kids. So like having known how the system works. But it's strange because as soon as you say, it's, I guess, some sort of denial that they're amicable. But once you say what's fair, they're no longer amicable and doesn't want to actually deal with it. So yeah, it's a very vulnerable position, and a definition of amicable when it goes their way, it's not amicable. Amicable means working it out together. And it's very difficult to do that. Like I've seen it, but it's very, very rare that an ex is truly amicable. Yeah. But and the question is he amicable if I ask more because I'll be housing the kids? And if you can't say that, yes, he'd support that, then I wouldn't necessarily say he's amicable. It's just not as violent because you're not pushing your point. So there's things to think about.
Yeah, and I also see that what happens in those situations is that the woman just says, okay, whatever, I'll take what I can get because I just want it to be over, or I just want to protect the kids. And actually, when that happens, that's not a fair outcome, and it's often the women that lose out financially as a result.
Yes, because there's a lot more going on with a woman. She's thinking about the kids, and this is generic. Like I'm sure there's men, but what I see is she's thinking about the kids, how to make sure that they keep in the same school. If they've gone to a private school, they want their life to be a continuation. Whereas I have seen many men go, well, how do I minimize my income? I do not want to pay her anything. She doesn't deserve anything. So I've seen it, and we've got people that actually help us forensically, where the guy hides the money in businesses and what have you, so they don't actually support their own kids. So it's very concerning. And what ends up happening is like she's over it. The hassle that she gets. I knew one person that was getting asked to, he's actually got a business. No, it's cash in hand, but he had the money to spend on his solicitor to ask her every bank statement to come up with a list of, questions of where she spent her money. So that cost her $300 each time just to ask that question. So there's a lot of manipulation, potentially, as again, there could be amicable ones, but there's a lot of manipulation, that goes on, and harm. It's intentional harm to the mother of their children. And yes, some of the times you just want to go, I don't care, just as long as I get away with it. But I guess we don't want to put ourselves in that vulnerable position in the first place by knowing the finances, but also the decisions that you make now in terms of being fair with your home and sorting out the finances puts your kids in a better position. If you've got a home and you've got a home and a stability, then it helps your kids. So you've got everything else to think of. So again, it's best if you actually work out your finances before you get overwhelmed, so that you can actually be in a position that when you've got, I guess the word narcissistic, people that you're dealing with, that you can actually think through the logic and come through a strategy with your solicitor so that the best outcome for your kids. And it's sad when people don't have the kids as their centre and their focus point.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a lot of harm that's done in trying to punish one parent, using the kids to try and punish a parent. It's very, very sad. Now, Christina, we are almost at the end of this podcast interview, and I'd love to end on a really sort of positive note. So for anybody that's listening to this, what are 3 sort of strategies that they could use to maximize what they can do to get onto the property ladder? So whether they're looking at doing this for the first time, or whether they're divorcing or separating and having to start again, what are three strategies that they could use to get there as efficiently as possible?
So what I generally tell people, the 3 points that I do, I've actually got a process for it, is the first thing is meet with someone that knows what they're talking about. So get a strategy, figure out what you are, even preempt if you're getting divorced, even what you're going to do or what's worth negotiating for you to be able to get a home. So you're looking at whether it's super, capital, how you can compromise it to be able to get a home. Yeah, or get your finances in order. So know how much you can borrow. But look at the strategy, and I think that's where people get caught out, because people do see mortgage brokers, which is fine, but it's the strategy. And that's somebody with experience to know how you can go about it. What ways can we sort of work the system, know what the lender requirements are so that you can get a home. And then also have someone there that can actually guide you through the market and what are the pros and cons of buying where and why. And I think that's the three key parts. So it's mindset, lender requirements, and strategy, and also having a person that could, coach you through the purchasing property and working out the right properties. And it's the same process no matter where you are, at which stage of life, from young kids to divorce. It's the same principle. So it's, that's what I usually recommend to people.
Yeah, beautiful. And there was just something there that you said about mortgage brokers. So when you were talking about the strategy and people going to see a mortgage broker, but sometimes they're 2 separate things. What should people be looking for then? Who's the right person to help them with that?
So I'm a mortgage broker, and what I found is that people were coming to me at a certain point, and they didn't have the right strategy. So to get in earlier, to know what the lender requirements, to put them in a best position, it's not really what a mortgage broker does. A mortgage broking is a transactional process. You come in, you can buy now, great, I'll just do the paperwork and you're done. But you need to have more of a relationship if you want to get the most bang for your buck. You need to have, like for divorce, you need to get the information right at the beginning through your divorce settlement so you know where you're going to be, what you need to do. So it's a good time to say, okay, this is the job I need to get, and actually plan. And that's the key part, is planning. People need to be a lot more financial savvy than they were 20, 30 years ago. In vulnerable positions, you've really got to know your stuff. To be able to get there. And not just, a mortgage broker won't tell you what property. They don't have the experience to tell you that's a good property, this is what happens in the future, downsizing, upsizing, all that sort of information. That's not a mortgage broker's job to do. They can get you a loan. That's what they do. They do a checklist. This is the best loan for you at the moment. It's not their job to be able to coach you through to getting a property. So I found that was a real gap. In the 25 years, it's becoming more and more critical that people become financially savvy. So that's why I think it's more important to be more than just a mortgage broker. I think that's only one small component of it, but you really need to have the full information and really be empowered with a lot of the information so that you can really benefit from it.
Christina, thank you so much for sharing all of this today. If somebody is listening to this and thinking, I'd really love to know more, I'd really love to understand, how I can purchase my own property or how I can invest in property, how can they get hold of you?
Yeah, that's great information. So I've got a website, which is School of Home Ownership, and on there's different parts of work that I do. So whether it's home loans for divorced people, and there's also masterclasses attached to it. Of course, you can contact me directly through the website, but I think it's really important to get as much education as you can. So yes, there's masterclasses in there. There's one called She's Got This, which is really focused on empowering women. and to get some information on there. And then, feel free to call and discuss and make an appointment. We can just go through things. Oh, and of course, I should say that we've also got social media. So we've got a free education on YouTube, what do you call it? Instagram, Facebook, and we're trying to go on TikTok. That's that's a new thing for me. So we want to just get information, education material out there so people can access and really empower themselves.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Christina. And of course, we'll have all of the links in the show notes so that people will have easy access to that. So again, Christina, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure and such valuable information and also inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you. What a privilege it is to work with another person that feels so passionate about empowering, especially empowering women. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.